Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show that takes complex scientific research, distills the absolute best insights, and, well, delivers them directly to you.
It's great to be here.
Today, we are diving into one of the most exciting fields in medical research, geroscience.
Right. And the core idea here, the hypothesis, is that aging itself is the biggest risk factor for pretty much all chronic diseases.
Alzheimer's, heart disease, diabetes, you name it.
Exactly. And if we can find therapies to slow down the fundamental, the molecular processes of aging.
We could delay or prevent all of them at once. We could extend not just lifespan, but health span.
That's the goal.
So our mission today is to understand a groundbreaking analysis from the CALERIE trial. That's the comprehensive assessment of long-term effects of reducing intake of energy.
It's a huge clinical study, and it tested if caloric restriction, or CR, can actually alter human aging markers.
And CR is just eating less, right? But without malnutrition.
Right. Lessening caloric intake without depriving yourself of essential nutrients. And we're looking at what happened at the molecular level over just 2 years. The results, published in Nature Aging, give us some really crucial answers.
Answers about how we should even measure success in anti-aging.
And that's such an important foundation, because historically, we know caloric restriction is a powerhouse, at least in the lab.
In yeast, worms, even primates.
For sure. It reliably increases healthy lifespan in multiple species. But translating that to humans and finding an effect you can actually measure in a short period, like 2 years, that's always been the missing link.
Exactly. So did the intervention work, and which of these molecular markers actually moved?
Let's start with the setup of the trial itself. It sounds immense.
Oh, the CALERIE Phase 2 trial is a landmark study. It was a multi-center, randomized controlled trial. Very rigorous.
And they were really careful about who they picked, right?
Yeah.
They weren't just looking for quick weight loss in people who were very overweight. Correct. That's a key point. These were healthy, non-obese adults. Average age was around 38. Their BMI was in the, 22 to 27.9 range.
So healthy people. The goal wasn't weight loss. It was about aging.
Precisely. It was about finding the effect of CR on aging physiology. So they took 220 people, randomized them, and one group just kept eating normally, what we call ad libitum.
And the other group, they were prescribed a pretty significant reduction.
They were, and this is where the story gets really interesting.
What was that initial prescription?
The prescription was designed to be intensive, a sustained 25% restriction in their daily calorie intake.
25% for 2 years.
For 2 full years. And that was measured precisely against their individual energy needs. The commitment is just immense. It required intensive behavioral coaching, frequent monitoring. They essentially threw everything they had at making it work.
So you have this huge human effort over 24 months. Now, how do you actually prove that it changed anything? How do we measure aging in a vial of blood?
The key technology here is DNA methylation, or DNAm. You can think of DNAm as these tiny chemical tags on your DNA that fundamentally control which genes get turned on or off.
I see. So they're like little switches.
Basically, yeah. And as we age, these patterns change in predictable ways. They accumulate errors, and that drives the progressive loss of system integrity.
So these changes are like the molecular signature of aging.
Precisely. And researchers have developed these very sophisticated algorithms, or clocks, using these DNAm patterns to estimate your biological age and your risk.
And this is where the calorie analysis is so revealing, right? Because they didn't just use one clock.
No, they used 3 different measures, representing 2 fundamentally different ways of thinking about what aging even is.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Let's break down the first model, what they call the static age clocks, PhenoAge and GrimAge. What are they?
Think of these static clocks as measuring your accumulated financial debt, or maybe your lifetime tax burden.
Okay, I like that. The total damage.
The total damage. They predict your future mortality risk based on all the risk you've accrued across your entire lifetime up to that one single moment. The result is given in years of DNAm age.
So if I'm 40 years old chronologically, but my GrimAge clock says I'm 55, it means I have 15 years of molecular risk that's built up faster than average. It's a snapshot.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's a static snapshot of the damage done. Now, you have to contrast that with the third measure they use,
The newcomer, DunedinPACE.
the dynamic newcomer. Exactly.
So what's the difference here?
Well, DunedinPACE doesn't really care about the total size of your debt, the accumulated damage. It measures your pace of aging,
So not the total mileage on the car, but how fast you're driving right now.
the speedometer.
The speedometer, that's it. It measures the rate at which you are currently accruing damage. It quantifies the change in biological age per chronological year.
So if my DNAm is high, I'm basically putting my foot on the accelerator. If it's low, I'm aging slower than the average person. It's exactly right. And this measure was specifically developed to track physiological decline over shorter timescales, making it a dynamic construct. It's focused on the change in risk, not the total accumulated risk.
Okay, so given that the CR intervention was only 2 years long, the hypothesis going in must have been pretty clear.
Absolutely. No one really expected the two static clocks, PhenoAge and GrimAge, to show some dramatic reversal.
Because you're not going to undo decades of damage in just 2 years.
It would probably take decades of intervention. But the dynamic measure, DunedinPACE, that was hypothesized to be highly sensitive to a short-term intervention that was actively slowing the rate of damage.
So did that prediction hold up? What did the calorie restriction actually change?
Let's start with the non-result because it's just as important.
Yeah.
The static clocks, they were largely unresponsive,
Nothing happened.
pretty much. The CR intervention did not lead to significant changes in biological age as measured by PhenoAge and GrimAge.
So everyone just got 2 years older, biologically speaking.
Basically, yes. The participants in both groups saw their biological age tick up by about 2 years over the 2 years. So that massive accumulation of prior risk, it wasn't reversed.
The intervention failed to turn back the clock. But did it slow the speedometer?
It did. Significantly. The calorie intervention did slow the pace of aging, as measured by the DunedinPACE algorithm.
Wow.
And the effect was measurable within just 12 months, and it was sustained for the full 2 years. It was a clear, statistically significant result.
Okay, now we have to talk about the magnitude. Because on paper, a 2-3% reduction in the pace of aging, it sounds modest. For someone listening, 2% can sound like a rounding error. So what does that actually mean? What's the so what?
This is the nugget you really need to take away. You can't just dismiss 2-3%. You have to look at what that change predicts in large observational studies.
Okay.
And those studies suggest that a small, modest slowing of this magnitude, that 2-3% reduction, it corresponds to a potential reduction in mortality risk of as much as 10-15%.
Wait, say that again? 10 to 15%. From a 2-year diet change, that is a profound number.
It's huge.
Can you put that in context for us?
Sure. Think about the biggest public health interventions we promote. That 10-15% magnitude. It's comparable to the known health benefits of intensive smoking cessation programs.
Wow.
It's a similar magnitude to the benefits we see from, say, controlling hypertension or managing cholesterol with medication. We're seeing a change in a molecular biomarker that predicts a massive clinical outcome, all from diet alone.
It really solidifies that link between lifestyle and molecular aging.
It does.
That almost makes that 2-year commitment feel worth it. But let's go back to the reality of that commitment, the adherence. You said they were prescribed 25% CR, which is just incredibly hard.
And it is. It's the biggest hurdle in any lifestyle intervention research. The participants, they just couldn't achieve that target consistently, even with all the intensive coaching.
So what did they actually manage?
The mean CR achieved across the 2 years was only 11.9%.
Not even 12%.
Nope. They managed less than half of what was prescribed.
Wait. They only achieved about 12% restriction, and that was enough to cause a 2-3% slowdown in their pace of aging, which predicts a 10-15% reduction in mortality risk.
That's right.
That tells us that even a sub-maximal dose of CR has these incredibly powerful anti-aging effects.
Absolutely. And they saw a clear dose-response relationship, which is critical.
Meaning the more you did, the better the result.
Exactly. It reinforces that the CR was directly causing the biological slowing. Participants who managed to achieve higher levels of restriction experienced proportionally larger effects on their DunedinPACE.
Can you give us a sense of that difference?
Well, for those who managed just over 10% restriction, the effect was significant. But the researchers used this sophisticated statistical technique to estimate what would have happened if someone had actually achieved a full, sustained 20% CR.
So a hypothetical but achievable 20%.
Right. And that analysis showed an even more pronounced slowing of DunedinPACE, a much stronger effect than the average 11.9% group experienced.
Which strongly suggests that the more you restrict, the greater the molecular benefit.
It really does.
And if we look at the broader picture here, this molecular analysis isn't happening in a vacuum. I mean, earlier reports from CALERIE already showed CR improved other parts of their health, right?
That's vital context, yes. The CR group saw improvements in cardiometabolic health things like, blood pressure, cholesterol, insulin sensitivity,
The classic markers.
the classics. They also showed slowed aging-related changes in physiological systems. The DunedinPACE result really confirms those clinical findings, but at the molecular level.
But I think the real transformative takeaway here is the tool itself. The fact that the static clocks didn't move, but the dynamic pace did, that highlights the incredible utility of DunedinPACE for future research.
It does. This analysis really elevates DunedinPACE into a prime candidate for what we call a surrogate endpoint in clinical trials. And that is a game changer for geroscience.
Okay, for our listeners who might not be familiar with trial design, help us understand what surrogate endpoint means in practical terms.
Imagine you want to test a new anti-aging drug. The true endpoint, reduced rates of heart disease or delayed death, that takes 20 or 30 years to measure.
No company can run a 30-year trial.
Exactly. A surrogate endpoint is a reliable, shorter-term measurement that can detect meaningful changes in the underlying process much, much faster.
So instead of waiting 30 years to see if the drug prevented heart attacks, you can just measure DunedinPACE after, say, 18 months.
Right. And if it slowed significantly, you have a really strong, early indicator that your intervention is working on the fundamental aging process itself.
And this study basically proves that DunedinPACE is sensitive enough to do that.
It does. It demonstrates that it can register change over just 2 years, confirming its potential to be that rapid screening tool for new therapies, making these long, expensive trials much more feasible.
So let's bring it all together. What should you, the listener, really keep in mind as the key takeaways from this massive effort?
Okay, firstly, the geroscience hypothesis got a big win here. A lifestyle intervention caloric restriction was proven in a rigorous trial to modify a molecular biomarker, DunedinPACE, that we know predicts morbidity and mortality.
And secondly, the measurement you use really, really matters. The intervention slowed the pace of aging, but it didn't reverse the accumulation of prior damage. That distinction is essential for all future anti-aging research.
And thirdly, the adherence reality. Even an average restriction of just under 12% less than half the intended dose was enough to generate these significant predictive results.
Which means our bodies are just incredibly sensitive to changes in energy input.
Very sensitive.
But we do have to acknowledge the critical limitation here. The trial follow-up was strictly limited to that 2-year period.
Right. We have strong evidence of a molecular change, but the ultimate question is, well, it's still unanswered. Will this slower pace of aging actually translate into fewer chronic diseases and a longer life?
We need that decades-long follow-up to really confirm it.
We do. To confirm the predictive power of DunedinPACE in an intervention.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you. Given that even this modest CR had such powerful effect, and we now have this fast, sensitive tool in DunedinPACE, how might researchers leverage this knowledge now?
Well, future researchers don't have to jump straight into a decades-long trial for every single idea.
Yeah.
They can now use DunedinPACE to quickly screen all sorts of interventions.
Things that are less intense than 25% CR for 2 years.
Exactly. Less intensive or shorter-term things, like intermittent fasting regimes, specific dietary compounds, different exercise protocols. This dynamic measure lets them prioritize. It lets them figure out which of these promising, less difficult paths are actually worthy of that huge, decades-long follow-up.
So it accelerates the entire search for practical ways to extend human health span.
That's the hope. It could really speed things up.